All right, we're back. I'm back. The piece that this was all covered in varnish and plugged. I let it soak and cleaned it up. I only let it soak probably an hour. Then I used a blowgun and blew it out. And then the piece that was stuck down in here ended up being, it wasn't threaded at all. And this here is a like a Coleman lantern funnel, and it's got a hook on it. It's nice, so you can put all your screws and little pieces in there that you don't want to get dropped in the bottom of your container. And I just let them soak. But down in the bottom here, trying to find something I can set this in without making a huge mess. There you go. Alright, so this is just a piece that of the air breather, the air cleaner hooks to it, and then it hooks to the carburetor. And I don't even know where I got this brass brush. I think it's for grill. I honestly think it's for cleaning a grill, you know, a barbecue grill. And it's just a very fine brass brush. But you can see just a few little scrubs, and that stuff that I've had it soaking in the power service just washes right off. I mean, it soaked in and dissolved it. So there's that piece. This is the part that the float hooks to with the needle valve inside there, and that cleaned up really well. Let me see if I can find. Oh, making a big mess, aren't I? There we are. This is the piece that I took all that time to find the screwdriver, and I was screwing on it, and it felt like it was turning out, and then it didn't do anything. Hang on one sec. That's nice and clear through there, and it's clear through there. So move stuff around so I can show you what it was I was talking about when it comes to the screwdrivers and removing these jets. Okay, so you can see that slot. You want the screwdriver to fit it as well as possible. Here is the one for the needle valve goes in this, and if you see here, this wouldn't work. You could put this up on the side like that and try to twist it, but a lot of time what happens is you break this ear off, or you just ruin it. I mean, if you ruin this surface in here and the needle valve won't move up and down smoothly anymore, well, time for new parts. Now in the past, what I've done is I've taken like a piece of wire, just any old wire, just copper wire, and strip it back, spin it, twist it, and then you can, that copper is softer than the brass, so you can go back and forth through it and clean the varnish out. If this is something that you're doing quickly, and you need to get it back together, rather than using the torch cleaners, which could elongate these or make them bigger, that's bad. So anyway, this one was down inside there, and I was turning, nothing happened. Obviously, there's no threads on it. Okay, so what I did was I was just blowing it off. And the other thing to remember is when you're using air and you're blowing into this orifice here, you want to keep your hand over anywhere that something might come out, because in the past I've gone to blow something out, blow something off, and I put the nozzle a little close and something goes flying off through, and you never, I mean, if it's something like this is a little washer that goes down inside some of these orifices, like where the needle valve that I screwed out here with the 2 parts, which is probably still soaking there. I think I feel it. No, that's a different one. Anyhow, it's the high speed. It's the high speed. And oh, by the way, this stuff lets you know if you have cuts, which, just about everything, gas or anything like that does. But maybe it's still in here. It's funny I don't see it. Anyway, it's the one that had the nut that I removed with the needle valve, which is probably right here in front of me and I'm just not seeing it, but it sets in the bottom of it. There's all those miscellaneous screws that go to the carburetor. Some of them are putting it back on the mower, but on the motor. Gotta be in there. Yeah, I felt something move. I felt something move. There we go. That's the one. Okay. So this needle here is your high-speed jet. This piece here, this nut, it's like a jam nut. When you screw this in, it actually spreads that little gasket out. And I don't know if it's rubber or canvas or what kind of material it is. It looks leathery, but it could be leather. When you screw this down, it squishes that, which holds onto this. So it's like a spring, kind of like this spring here, how it keeps this from backing out. It's like a lock washer, but not, you know. This holds it when you set this to 1 turn or 3/4 of a turn or whatever. Okay, so the high pressure is held by tension on that gasket, on that leather gasket. And this is what sets that tension. So you could tighten this down to the point where it's almost too hard to turn, or if you had it loose, it would back out as you ran. So we got, it looks like we have everything cleaned up. I used the air. I blew through this orifice here, blew through this one, and there's actually it looks like there's a gasket down in there I'm not going to mess with. I got this all cleaned out. And so that brush, what I've found is that you put it in there and just rock it back and forth, and unbelievable the amount of cleaning that just did. I did that a minute ago or 10 minutes ago, and all of a sudden I could see something down in the bottom, some sort of writing. So that's neat. The throttle plate's working good. The choke lever and plate is working good. There's a number, MT52A. No idea what that signifies, but if you know, then you know what this carburetor is. The low-speed jet goes over to this orifice here with all these holes, and if you notice, they're not even drilled perfectly straight in that. They're like one's centered and a little off and a little off. But it's like they were like custom tuning, or they just said, man, 4 holes is good enough, you know, whatever. So you push that down in, and it went down in. Okay, so I couldn't get it out. Remember all the banging that I did, and now it came out. But what I did before was, I remember I blew air in. So let me show you that. I think I have, yeah, I got some air left. So I'm going to put my hand so it'll hit my hand there. And then I'll put some air in here. There. Now it didn't come out like that. It just came out and set right at the top. And I was like, oh, good. And then I was able to, like that, and I was able to get onto it and pull it out. And I realized that, yeah, there's no threads on it. Okay, so that's back down in there. And then this goes down, and basically the gas will come from the low speed side, goes across this piece here, and it comes out a hole in there, which is right here between these. And I'm probably working backwards. It comes up this way, it comes across this way, and then goes down here and works like a Venturi system through there. And that's why when you screw your your idle or low speed, I guess you would call it your low speed, that adjusts how much fuel comes through the carburetor. So we'll get that in there. But before we do that, let's get this bottomed in so that it doesn't possibly stick in too far. I didn't see it. If it even does, it probably doesn't. Yeah, it very well could. So we're going to get this piece put back in there, and that feels like it also holds that other piece down. There we go. And then we'll screw this in till it touches. And then we're just going to come, we're going to come back a turn. And I'll go a turn and a half just to make it rich. I can always adjust after that. And then we get our high speed. We'll put that plug back in there because that's all nice and cleaned out now. You can see in there, it's all nice and clean. The varnish is gone. Can't believe some of the paint is still here. You can see these orange pieces of paint. That must be the motor. Yeah, some of the motor must have been that color. So we want to get that down in there flat. It's got to set down there all the way in the bottom. So we'll go nice and easy. And I don't like that. Let me find something else that I can gently put it back into where it goes. There, that looks like she's there. And then of course the needle, once this is going to go down and compress that. And the needle itself, there it is, goes through the center. Okay. Now I'm just going to start it in there, but I'm not going to bottom it because even though this shouldn't affect that, I've found that sometimes some needles are affected by that. So then you end up breaking the tip off of that, like I said. Sometimes can happen. So we'll take this, feel some pressure there. Let's see what we have for tension. So it's pretty good. Let's go a little more. Yeah, that feels pretty good. It's just, you need to feel some resistance, I guess. And again, when you're tightening these, you know, you don't bottom these hard because these are brass and they can bottom, stick, and break off. So I just have a couple fingers on this. That appears to be closed. So then there's half a turn. That's 1.5. Or within, you know, a smidgen of it. So when people say, you know, low speed adjustment, high speed adjustment, you know, sometimes you start at 3/4 of a turn and a turn and a half, and 3/4 here, turn and a half there. Some people start at a turn and a turn. I'm going to start at 1.5 and 1.5. This mower, the motor on the mower, is either 1/16 or 1/32 parts. Instead of like 50-to-1, it's 32-to-1 or 16-to-1. So it's got a lot more oil than normal, than like today's chainsaws are 50-to-1. But online I saw that in the 50s and 60s they were using 16-to-1 and 32-to-1. So that's what I was getting at there. So on now this piece here, we put the needle seat. This is the needle seat, and there's a gasket on there. We'll put that in there. And now again, you have to have a screwdriver that will span that entire thing. Which I believe I used that one. I wonder if this one will even go in there. Holy cow, look at that. So this is the biggest snap-on screwdriver that I have. What is it, a number? They call it a 3/8. Before I tighten that, I'm pretty sure I have an SK as well. So if you have SK or Craftsman, I guess this is probably the same. It fits pretty good in there, 3/8. Then I have these little ones that are 3/8, but they're short. So there we go. And tight's tight, broken's too, yeah. The F word in there. Too effing tight. Tight's tight, broken's too effing tight. Okay, so now we make sure everything there is clean. Now this is the gasket. And if you see, there's a piece here that goes in that hole that goes up and then back down. That's a it's hooked together. Like if I put air in this hole, I feel it come out that one. Okay. So, and then on the carburetor, again, there's a hole there. And if I put air in there, I feel it come out here. So that hole has to be open. And apparently, through this whole time of it being assembled, it has not been open. So let me just try a little drill bit. Okay, and then we'll take that. It might just be an air vent. As high as it goes, I would probably think it's just an air vent. As high as it goes to the in that float bowl, that's probably all this is, so that when the float is working, if it got air bound or liquid bound or however you want to look at it, the fluid, the gas couldn't run in here unless the air was letting itself out. So that's most likely, I'm pretty confident, that's all that this is. That's just a vent. to allow the float to work properly. But again, if it's closed, if it's plugged off, then the float will fill half up, and then it can't go anywhere. It's kind of like holding your thumb on a straw. It's kind of like that. So we'll get this back on here. There we go. And that hole looks dandy this time. The needle valve. Normally I would take a piece of very fine, you know, sandpaper or emery cloth or something, and just to make sure you have every bit of varnish off of that. But it's been soaking. And that's Lily over there grunting and groaning because it's hot out. She just wants to lay down on the cement. But I'll show you Lily girl a little bit later. She's a good girl. She's very vocal though. You know, we always tell people, no, my dog's nice. She doesn't bite, but she does worse. She judges. You've probably seen that saying somewhere before. But it's funny. She does do these Hufflepuff noises, and she'll, like, if you tell her to do something, she'll like, I don't want to do that, but she does it. Okay, so now it tastes terrible, but I always try to test this. You can do it on the carburetor or off. So if I blow air in here, I should get air out here. And then if I pick up on the bowl, that should shut the needle valve off, and I shouldn't be able to blow out. So there, you can hear it come out. And then it went off. Or you can turn it upside down. Now I should not be able to blow. And I can't. Then you lift up gently. Okay, so that appears to be working well for, you know, being 10,000 years old, or however old it is. So nice and clean inside there. This is good, that's good. The gasket looks nice. So we'll get her gently set back down there. And then we just find our screws. One. There's one. And you can see these screws, this has been taken apart once or twice in its last 60 years. I mean, it depends. If this is a 50, you know, that's 70 years. If it's a 60, you know, or 70, you know, it's still almost 50 years old. So I won't be surprised if it runs. I won't, because I've worked on a lot of old tractors that you could see the metal wires showing through the insulation, and as long as they're not touching each other or touching a part of the tractor to ground themselves out, and as long as there's spark coming out of the magneto or coil, the darn things, they run. I mean, it's just crazy, crazy, crazy. Because that's all you need, as everybody knows, is compression, fuel, and spark. Or ignition, like a diesel, whatever, no spark. Okay. So, everything is working duck diddly. Okay, we gotta put our reed back together. And it's got wear marks on it where it was contacting the base here. So you can kind of see that, how everything matches. So that was easy to not screw that up. Because when you've never taken anything apart before, which I do that kind of stuff all the time, it's like, this thing's never going to go back together. This thing's never going to run again, you know. So now I can't pick up that gasket. Okay, I almost gave up on it. And there's two of the linkages, which I can't believe are still here. Well, they were. And there's another one here. Goes to like, it hooks basically the governor to the throttle. Okay, so we need the little plate. There's that. And then there are two little girls there, or fellas, however you want to look at it. This is a reed valve. So a reed valve opens up when the air is going. It's like a one-way valve. When the air is coming in from the carburetor into the crank of the engine, then it's coming in this way from the carburetor, and it'll push that valve open or get sucked open, and then the fuel mixture will come in, and the gases end up in the cylinder bore. The piston compresses, the spark plug sparkies, and off it goes and running. Now, if this wasn't in here, it would be possible that this would run. It could run backwards. If you put the carburetor on the other side of the motor, you could actually make these run the other direction. All right, that's not quite as aligned as it. Well, it's not lined up to where it was, so we're gonna move that over to exactly where it was. Don't know if that's a huge consideration or if the valve just needs to work, but we put it back. That's exactly back where it was, so that's that. Now this, now it's starting to show another number too, which is 2950. That's right there in the bottom of that casting. So the carburetor gets bolted back on here, and here's the gasket. And I probably should make another one, but we're going to try this one just because I've put so many things back together and you're like, that's never going to work. And they do. I mean that could be a piece of a brown paper bag. I've seen people use brown paper bags for different head gasket. Somebody told me once that they put it's like a Vaseline or something on the paper bag. I don't know if it was Vaseline or mineral oil or. Anyway, the reason for it was to increase your compression, and they would remove the old gasket, which might have been 50 thousandths, and then of course these are less than 16 or 10 thousandths, right? So you would get that extra 50 thousandths in compression. And if you're almost metal to metal, it actually seems like it's going to get harder to blow that out, but I digress. So now we got to put that back on there. And of course I took it apart and I don't remember. I assume that that must be up. I believe it is. And then this girl here would go like that. Okay. Yes, because this linkage here is going to hook into here as far as vroom vroom goes. Okay. So we get our gasket, put it back on the way that it was. Like so. And then that was Lily again, being all grumpy down there on the floor. Now this one has a copper washer, and this one has got a lock washer. So let me see if this side, Okay, so that's what it is. Now I put that back together, I got to take it back apart again. That copper washer, because that piece goes underneath the reed valve, you want it sealed from the air, the atmospheric air, pressure, vacuum, whatever. So, let me get it open again. There. So, if I just stuck the lock washer in there, it would have the ability to breathe air around that. But being as though they put this copper washer on there, it can go on there like that. And then this can go like that. Get our nut started on there, which it's always fun. But should be able to get her in there. The other possibility is if I just hold that with one of 87 fingers, and we can turn this one, possibly. The other thing I'm wondering, is that supposed to have, I think at one time it did have a star lock behind it. Let me take that out of there. That doesn't feel quite right, but that's the only, yeah, those are the ones. So being as though this is the first time I've ever had this particular model apart, it's all new to me, or as new to me as it is anybody else that's first starting this, right? So if you've never done it before, we're in the same boat. Alright, just not sticking up far enough to catch the thread. Yeah, we might have just caught it. Okay. Let's try it with the screwdriver real quick, just to get another thread or two a turn. No, it wants to argue, so we'll put the other one in, because I don't want to tear that gasket. That's not that big a deal, really, because you can make another gasket. That's not that big a deal. I had an old mechanic. Yeah, some of you probably laugh and say, "Old, you're old." I had an old mechanic tell me, "Oh, anything, just a small ball peen hammer, and you can make most of your gaskets." And I thought he was crazy, and then he showed me what he was talking about. Basically, he would take the material and set it on top there, and if you tap very lightly with the ball peen, you could trace yourself around the outside, and then it would trace the inside circles of whatever, if you were making this gasket here, you'd tap, 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 and basically the tap would cut the material inside and out. And then the holes, of course, you would see the marks from the holes, and then you would just use like a leather punch or anything, 22 shell, depending on the size. I've used 22 shells for when I didn't have the leather punches or anything else at the time, to make that hole clean through, and it worked. Alright, we need the little wrench, which is probably sitting right here in front of me. Just like a snake, right? If it was a snake, it would have bit me, kind of deal. But I don't see it, so we'll just get another one. There we are. 7/16, I believe. And course it's turning, right? So hold it like that. Turn the screwdriver end. Now once it bottoms out, I'm going to hold the screwdriver end and I'm going to turn the nut, because I don't want to turn that copper washer any thinner than it already was. And this is a lock washer, so I'm not real concerned about that as far as turning which, you know. And I probably should have put the thing on before I put this together. Put the linkage as it was apart. Probably would have been a good idea, but we'll see what we can do. And the other possibility is this. Yes, it is malleable, but you really shouldn't mess with that much. Like, I could bend this or take this off. The other thing is basically you should take it apart and you should be able to drift this pin out, but I'm not going to even try that because it's so old. Because if you see, this end's open, this one's open, and on this side this end's open, but if you hit this, it's possible to break any of these ears off, and that would not be good. So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to loosen the carb back up. It doesn't take that long. That one. What happens when you're doing something like this for the very first time? You end up putting it together and taking it apart more times than you need to, but yeah, well, what are you gonna do, right? Okay, so now that is almost off. Guess it can't go any slower. I'll bet you that screw is turning. That's why I've been turning it for 20 seconds and nothing happened. I'll bet. There we go. Okay. So now we take that linkage and we put her in there like so. And then we take it and we put it in there like so. So now when this moves, let me hold that. When this moves, the linkage moves. Okay, good. And put some of these back together. A lot of times these Tiltsons or Tiltson or Tiltston, however people say it, the nuts are just too thick, and they might have done that on purpose when they were building these so that they couldn't back themselves out one at a time. It's possible, because it's impossible to take the nut off completely. Take one nut off while the other one is on. So that could have been something that they planned. Somebody said, oh, well, you know, if that one loosens up, we don't want it to fall completely off. He said, oh, yeah, good idea, Charlie. Frank, Fred, whatever. Okay. It's that one again. Again, like I said. And this one. Again. Right. So this is fairly good. I mean, you don't want it too loose, because this must be part of the governor system, this spring. And then this hooks That must hook somewhere there, but I'm not positive. This one hooks underneath. This one definitely doesn't hook there, so we're gonna have to look a little further down the line. But now the carburetor's back together there. We can put the reed valve back on again. Ta-da. No ta-das today. There's that, there's that. Everything is little but your fingers, right? And they seem to have started nicely. Again, we want to make sure that reed valve is in its wear pattern spot. For whatever reason, just because that's where it was. And it worked. Still curious about that crack, whether it might not, it should not make a huge difference, because here's the gasket. See how they had it. They had it like this. So that it does the crack does go to the inside, meaning the air from outside is going to go into the crank when the pulse of the motor pulls that valve open, the flutter valve, however you want to look at it. But I'm hoping that it's not enough. Otherwise, we'll have to seal that up with something that's gas safe, not gas soluble. However you want to look at that. Okay. Look at all these pieces I have everywhere. So the other thing that was kind of weird was the air breather for this thing. Let me find it. I moved everything so I could get everything on the bench easier. There it is. That's the air breather. Isn't that the weirdest thing you've ever seen? Well, maybe not you guys, but for me, it's like a big piece of cardboard, cork, something. And I can only assume that's the air breather because that's the way that it's set up. There's a plate. This goes on here, and then there's a plate there, and that sets there, and then there's a cover on top. So, yeah, that's, and I don't, I don't dare. I mean, I want to clean it, but I don't dare. I'm just afraid that however they put this together, if it's glue. So maybe I'll put some air on the inside of it and see. Sure enough, yeah, you can feel air on the outside, so I'll just leave that, and if I start it up and it starts running like it's smoking terribly, then we'll change our minds on what exactly we're going to do. So we'll get that there. And then there was a wing nut on the bottom, so it's kind of like throwing tools around. Kind of like everything. I don't want to say was reverse engineered, but it's the way it appears. And then there's a little tiny hole right here that must be just in case. The only thing I can come up with is, just in case the air breather ever gets plugged up, it can maintain a minute bit of air breathing. I mean, I don't think it's to, I mean, that would be a lot of gas if it built up, if the thing flooded and it had that much gas in it. I mean, I don't think that's the reason, but it's part of their fine tuning maybe from way back when, before I was born. All right, so this is the bracket for the fuel tank, which is outside right now, but this breather goes on like that, and then it bolts down like that. There's another plate here someplace. Like I said, I move stuff every place. When you don't have a big, there we go. When you don't have a big area to play with. Okay, so that sets like that. And then this goes on there, like so. And then that goes out that hole in the bottom, like so. And then you would put the wing nut on. And it looks like it's made so that you can take the carburetor off and leave this on the motor, the gas tank mount strap, whatever, and your air breather just sets like that. And then you would just push this up, slide it back underneath there, tighten it up again. Crazy, crazy, crazy. So now we're going to put it back on the motor, figure out where these linkages go, and we'll get back to you. Stay safe.